Hello, everyone. Welcome to our monthly Ethics in Games with Sherry Jones. We are about to go and get started. And for this month, we are doing the game To the Moon. So take it away, Sherry.
Okay. Thank you, Kay. Okay, so we are addressing ethics in games through this little indie game called To the Moon. This is a little shot from the game of someone going to the moon, but it's actually a fantasy of someone going to the moon. So I'm going to go to the next slide to explain what this game is. Okay, so what exactly is To the Moon? Go next. Okay, so To the Moon is actually a fairly older game. It's actually first created in 2011. Then it was re-released in 2014 and then released in 2017. It's a first-person role-playing adventure game. And it's made and developed by Freebird's Game. It is, and I'll warn everybody, it is pretty lo-fi, low-fidelity game design because it is made using the RPG Maker XP engine. So if anyone has experience using RPG Maker, you know that pretty much everything look pretty lo-fi, 8-bit, 16-bit quality looking games. But that's not the focus of this game. The focus of the game is the narrative, okay? It's released on Windows, OS X, Linux, Android, iOS, and you can freely download this game from Steam. Last week, the game was on sale for $4.99. It went back to $9.99, but I think the price is going to come down again pretty soon. So the game won the Best Story Award from GameSpot in 2011 for the End of the Year Awards. And it's really one of the very few indie games out there that's considered art. Players and critics alike both considered this game as an art form, specifically because it contained very emotional content in the way it told the story. Now, this piece of news just came up, and I'm excited about this, that the main developer, Kang Gao, announced on May 18th on his YouTube channel that a full-length animated feature film of this game will be made. And supposedly it's made by a major Japanese production studio. So everyone's kind of looking forward to this, and it might come out in 2018, it might come out in 2019. So in this sense, even though I am presenting to you an older game that was made in 2011, the relevance of this game will come to the fore very soon in the coming months. Okay, so next. Okay, so there are some key plot points I'm going to cover really quickly. So the main character, John Wyles, in the game is a dying man who wanted this company called Segment Corp to implant artificial memory in his mind before he dies. And his wish before he dies is that he wants to go to the moon. But he does not really know why he wants to go to the moon. So this is part of the plot point there. Now, the company Segment Corp sent two doctors, Eva Rosling and Neil Watts, to implant this artificial memory in John Wyles. The problem is that during this implementation, it didn't go. The memory didn't stay. So they basically stayed on as the players, as the playable avatars, essentially, that were using these two characters to figure out exactly what happened in John Wyles' life that didn't allow for the artificial memory to be implanted. So next. Okay. So there are several characters, but the key characters, again, John Wyles, he's the dying man that we just discussed. River E. Wyles is John's wife, and she will come very important later in the story. Joey Wyles is John's brother in the story. And the two doctors is Dr. Neil Watts and Eva Rosling, who represent Segment Corp. So next. All right, so the situation in the game primarily deals with death and wish fulfillment. But even though it's dealing with very heavy themes, it's really appropriate for players of all ages to play. Okay, the language is friendly for all ages. Now, some of the themes, without reading the whole gigantic list to you, okay, memory loss and suffering is a big theme. Self-determination of memory is also a big theme. And also, I just put it in bold and yellow. This idea of falsifiable and unreliable memory is also a big theme. Interestingly enough, this game also incorporates the discussion of Asperger's syndrome for one of its characters, which is central to the way John perceives his wife. Okay, so we'll discuss that later. Anyway, those are the major themes in the story. Please go next. Okay, so we're going to talk about a particular moral philosophy that we can use to discuss what's happening in To the Moon. So I'm going to introduce this philosopher next. Okay, so I decided to apply Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialist ethics to discuss this little game. So Jean-Paul Sartre is a French philosopher who's pretty recent. He passed away in 1980, and he's considered one of the fathers of existentialism. And his philosophy later got influenced by Marxism. Okay, and we're not going to go into Marxism in this presentation. I'm going to focus primarily on his existentialism. He addresses the primary question that Sartre addresses is what it means to be an authentic being. And in a sense, an authentic being is also condemned to be free in a world that has no God. He follows the Nietzschean idea that God is dead. Okay, so this is a 20th century philosophical thinking that threads through 20th century philosophy. Now, his earlier philosophy, he deals with the ethics of authenticity. So that is what he is focused on, is what does it mean to live an authentic life? But his latter philosophy in his later years deals with the responsibility of the individuals who are Marxist view of social status, social structures, okay, the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. So for this presentation, I'm going to apply the key concept from his earlier philosophy, from Sartre's earlier philosophy, to analyze the morality of John Wyles' action in To the Moon. So next. So I'm going to go into the discussion of this game, and we'll go back to the philosophy after we dissect the gameplay, okay? So I'm going to go over the types of puzzles and mechanics that are in this game. So next. All right. So because I said earlier that this game was made in 2011 with RPG Maker, please recognize that the graphics is not going to be the most enticing graphics ever, because it's intentionally made with lo-fi graphics. So lo-fi refers to low fidelity. So in the art world, low fidelity means that it's drawn less close to realism. Okay, so realism, the other extreme of realism would be photorealism, which is you're drawing something that looks photorealistic. Okay, lo-fi usually means it doesn't look photorealistic, it's its own style. So it doesn't mean that it's less than or that's worse than other type of games that have high fidelity graphics. It's just the way that's preserved because the game intends to be abstract. That's what it means to be lo-fi. So some of the game mechanics included in this game includes finding and obtaining objects on game map, using obtaining objects to unlock puzzles, and then there's memory mementos that you're obtaining throughout the gameplay. And then in the bold there, in yellow and bold, is the whole point of playing this game, the whole point of solving puzzles is to trigger John Wyles' memory events so you can understand what happened in his mind. So please go next. Okay. So I'm going to show you the way you obtain objects in this game. So there's a little four-parter. So underneath where it says left click an object to interact with it, you would use left click if you're on PC to interact with objects and to view them. Okay, so next. Okay, then you would have options. So if you access an object, usually the game will give you options to figure out what kind of actions you can do onto the object. Next. Okay, so this one, it says they're going to find a branch. So next. Okay, so once you get a branch, it will tell you receive tree branch. So this is a very simple way to obtain objects in the game. Okay, so next. All right, so this is the setting menu. So if you open up the settings, you actually get to see this, and you get to see, in this screenshot, you get to see John Wyles' heart monitor. So on the very top, that green bar right there shows the status of his heart condition because he is a dying man. So it's kind of morbid, but that's part of the gameplay. Oh, go next. Yeah. Yeah, and then the other screen, if you see the 3 tabs, it says character, notes, items. So the menu screen is very, very simple. It gets to show you what the characters are. Then you can look at notes on items to remind yourself what you have done throughout the gameplay. Next. Okay, so also you can explore spaces. So if you click on certain spots, it can trigger events such as this one, which is go upstairs, and you can say yes or no, and it will trigger other events after that. Next. Okay, this one allows you to also give you dialogue options. So you can talk to players or talk to other characters in the game, and you get to have certain options that can trigger further dialogue events from them. Next. Okay, there's also puzzles that you have to solve, but it's also point and click puzzles. In this particular puzzle, you're trying to click on those round orbs on the left and bottom of the little puzzle to switch the puzzle pieces so you can actually see what's hidden behind the puzzle. So this is one of those flipping puzzle kind of pieces. Next. Okay, so also, because we're playing with someone's memory, which we'll explain in a bit, we're playing with someone's memory. On the top is a menu bar that shows you the different ages of the character at different moments of his memory. That's what those things are. So you're able to click on different moments in John Wyles' life to time travel to his different moments of his memory. Okay, next. Okay, so this is a little joke in the game because a lot of people think of RPG role-playing games as games that must have battle systems. So the game maker, the game designer, decided to add this little bit in the game to kind of make fun of RPG in general and make fun of itself. Okay, so in this little battle scene, there's a little squirrel on the left, and you're given the option to attack or defend. So next. So I click on attack, and then there were 4 options I came up with that. So you can attack 4 ways. You can do the tsunami kick, tornado punch, shoe, or other shoe. So I click on tsunami kick. Okay. And then you can adjust your volume, like how loud you want to yell at the squirrel. So I chose the loudest. And the result is, well, he says, Dr. Watts would say, this ends here. So he's threatening the squirrel. And then he's yelling at them based on my command. So the little children who was running behind him told Dr. Watts to stop it, or we tell Ma that you're abusing animals. Okay. So next, yeah. And then and Tommy says, yeah, she'll call the cops on you. Oh, come on, I wasn't actually gonna. Okay. And then he asks, don't you like role-playing? Okay. And the little child says, you should be ashamed of yourself. So this little scene really is self-referential. And because the game maker is kind of recognizing itself as an RPG, but it's not an RPG with a real battle system. So he added this in here just to kind of have a little joke saying, okay, there you go. You want a battle system, I gave it to you. But the little kids revolted, they don't want it. Okay, so next. All right, so we're gonna go into the introduction of the game. This is how the game introduces itself. And it's a scene of us meeting with the doctors and with the dying John Wyles. Now, either Chris or Kay, if you don't mind reading this little section for us.
Sure, I can go ahead and take it. So, Dr. Watts and Dr. Rosaline, I presume. Thanks for coming on such short notice. That's okay. I tend to be bad at predicting deaths as well. Are you the patient's daughter? Oh, no, I'm just his caretaker. And these are my children, Sarah and Tommy. It's not exactly a 9-to-5 job, so Johnny lets us live here. I suppose this Johnny is our man. Johnny? Listen, if it's a kid we're dealing with, I don't think we're the ones you want. No, he just prefers to be called that. He's upstairs right now with his medical doctor. Come with me. Come on, grab that case and let's go. When my back breaks one day, I'll sue you with the insurance claim. All right, let's head upstairs before I drop this. Go upstairs? Yes or no? Yes. He's unresponsive at this point, but by the looks of things, he's still consciously hanging on. It's hard to say how long you'll have, but I would hurry. Ready to set up? You have options of set machine down or look around first. Since it's obviously we're trying to get this done quickly, we set the machine down. Dr. Rosaline, yes, it'll be just a moment. Are you sure a common household power outlet is sufficient? No worries, we're the experts. How's he doing? Not so well. If I were to say he just got a day or two left. That's plenty of time. So you two can grant him any wish, huh? So what's the wish? The moon. He wants to go to the moon. So can you do it? Why don't you tell us about our client here? That I don't really know much about. Johnny's an odd man. Through the 2 years that I've worked here, he rarely spoke. He worked as a craftsman for most of his life, and his wife passed away two years ago. I don't really know many details. Here, take this. Received remote patient monitor. That'll keep you updated on Johnny's status. Johnny's heart monitor is now activated in the menu. And we get our little slide.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. So that was just the intro to the way we meet up with the patient. But the way the game started is the same way for the rest of the game, is that we don't really know much about John. So it's a hint that through the rest of the game, you're supposed to explore and figure out why John is requesting the doctors to meet with him there. So we're going to go to the next set. Okay. So a little more introduction. This little section is about the life agency traversal machine. So this is a machine that is used to alter someone's memory, to implant artificial memory into someone's mind. Okay. So I'll go ahead and take this section. Okay. So Lily says, and Lily is the caretaker of John Wyles. Okay, so she's just a nurse. She's not his relative or anything. So she says, by the way, I'm curious. How does it work? Do you just write him another life like a novel? So we can choose explain or move on. So I chose explain. Dr. Watts says, what? No, I'm no novelist. We can't just write out an entire life manually. There's way too many dimensions. Lily says, then how do you do it? Okay. Dr. Rosalie responds, it's mainly the machine that does the doing. In a nutshell, our job is to travel through his memories to as early as possible. And when we do, we will then transfer his registered desire of going to the moon to the reconstruction of the world and himself at that early state. And Dr. Watts continued to say, and with the help of a wiki of data and his own, the machine would then simulate a rerun. Dr. Rosalie responds, except this time, he'll have the motivation of his registered desire with him all his life. Lily responds, so you'd be depending on him fulfilling his own wish by simply having the desire to? How could that be? Everyone has ambition for things, but most don't accomplish them. Dr. Rosalie responds, that's because in the real world, ambitions fluctuate and fade. People start things with a passion, but eventually they lose that initial drive and slow down. But imagine if you locked onto that initial push through your entire life, never wavering. It's more powerful than it seems. So Dr. Watts adds, that being said, no ambition is going to help a dead man. I better go get started. So the doctor who's attending to John Wyles says, go on, I'll watch over his physical condition through the procedure. Okay, and we can either initiate or not yet. I click on initiate. So Dr. Wyles says, ready or not, here it goes. Okay, so once we initiate this machine, that's where the first time we see that bar shows up on the top, the heads up display where you have the character, and they're supposed to be, the little individual characters are supposed to represent the different ages of John Wyles in his mind. So next. Okay. And Dr. Rosaline says, this should be the last accessible memory. So she was clicking on the last bar, which is the one that they can access, and everything else they couldn't access. Next. And then it says disable speech for all except Johnny. Now, I show this machine detail to you because, well, honestly, if we start talking about the technology, none of this makes a lot of sense. We know from philosophy of mind, as well as from neuroscience, as well as from psychology, that human memory is highly unreliable. Our memory gets contaminated every year as we age. Okay, different information, different experiences come into our minds, and it contaminates and colors our memory. So if we are saying that we can access the memory of John Wyles by going into his mind and jumping in through time, what we're essentially accessing is his filtered, colored, manipulated version of what the past is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the true version of his past. So it would be depending on how well he remembers his past. But again, we're talking about a very old man. So it's very hard to say how reliable the memory is. All we can know is that we're accessing what he thinks his past is, which is pretty much manipulated and filtered. Okay, so we can go next. All right, so I'm going to address one of the rhetoric, one of the arguments that the game is trying to make. And this is a very, very problematic concept in the game. It's this idea that memory is a manipulable object that can be divorced from the subject. So what do I mean by this? Is that traditionally speaking in philosophy, subject is defined as one with the will to do something, one with the power to decide to do something. That's the subject. Object is defined as that which is for me. So that thing that does what I want it to do, right? So objectification of objects, objectification of the individual would not be good, because what you're saying is that that human being does not have the will to decide for him or herself, right? So this idea that we can manipulate memory is problematic, because memory is supposed to belong to the subject. But in this little game, memory somehow is some kind of object that can be manipulated without the involvement of the subject. So that's a problem. So Chris, okay, can you take this part for me?
Sure.
Okay.
About the following scene. The following scene, Dr. Rosaline and Dr. Watts are using a machine to examine John's memory and communicate with John's mind. The game represents this communication as if Dr. Rosaline and Dr. Watts are traveling through the landscape within John's memory. The John speaking in this scene is constructed based on the dying man's memory of himself. In other words, this construct of John is based on how John remembers himself in the past. John, what a pleasant surprise. We don't get many visitors around here. Dr. Rosaline, my name is Dr. Eva Rosaline, and this is Dr. von Matterhorn, Dr. Lorenzo von Matterhorn. That's Dr. Watts saying that. Dr. Rosaline says, are you familiar with Sigmund Agency of Life Generation? John says, oh, are you two from the agency? How convenient. I've just been calling for you. I've just been thinking of calling for you. Lily, get us some tea, please. Lily? Dr. Watts. Actually, you've already called us. Dr. Rosaline. We're here to fulfill our contract from the relative future. Dr. Watts, careful there. If you slip off the cliff, we're going to have to reload this memory. Dr. Rosaline, watch it, Neil. Show some respect. Dr. Watts, it's just a program, you know. Dr. Rosaline, I know, but this is his last accessible memory. We need its cooperation. Dr. Watts, worst comes to worst, we can just reboot it. Dr. Rosaline, why would you waste time like that? John, you are here to take me to the moon, aren't you? Dr. Rosaline, yes, John. John says, I suppose I had a good run. Dr. Watts, not good enough, it seems. John, so you can do it? Can you take me to the moon? Dr. Rosaline, we can't, but you might be able to. Dr. Watts, why do you want to go there? John, I don't know. Dr. Rosaline, it's fine. You can tell us. It's essential for helping us to get you to go there. Dr. Watts, do you want the fame, the money? You've got to have a motive. John, I'm sorry, but I really don't know. Dr. Rosaline, nevertheless, Johnny, here's what we will do. We need to get you into your childhood, but it's too distant to do so with one memory hop. Thus, we will need to traverse through your memories with gradual backwards leaps. Dr. Watts, which you've given us the permission to do in the relative future. Dr. Rosalie, once we lay down the waypoints in your childhood memories for direct access, we will return here. That's when you'll need to help us influence the childhood you to become an astronaut. John, as long as you can take me to the moon, I will cooperate in any way possible. Dr. Rosaline, now, in order to leap to a memory, we need an item that is of importance to you. Do you have a memento of some sort to get us started? Received. Note. Moon.
Thank you, Chris. Before I go to the next thing, that was a lot of reading. Thank you.
No worries.
This is an RPG, and you know, by nature, RPGs is just text heavy, so there's a lot of narrative portions that we have to get through. But I wanted to reflect really quick on that particular scene because before we go to this next big piece, I think it's we could say that it's actually a terrifying idea. I mean, in the game seems to suggest that being able to manipulate one's memory is a good thing. It is a positive thing, you know, and also that in the game they qualify by saying that the company, the Sigmund Corp company, says that in their policy that you cannot give a patient this artificial memory implant unless they're dying on a deathbed, because doing this artificial memory implant has a side effect of ruining the real memory of the patient. Mm-hmm. So that's part of their policy. But the game is presupposing that the individual always has the ability to request, right, that the company come and change our memory. But if this technology is here, there's nothing that would say to prevent a company from actually implanting memory without us really recognizing it. And I think that's actually a terrifying idea.
Well, exactly. It's one of those interesting pieces that it's like, well, we can do it, but we can only do it if you're almost dead, because the side effects are so horrifying that right. You know, that's one way to look at it as well. And the other thing about the game was interesting is it reminded me a lot of like the Final Fantasies and also Metaplace, whenever Metaplace was out there. was really interesting to see the navigation and the way that you sort of moved around the world, interacted with the world. So very straightforward, very easy to move around. Clicking on the bubbles to make the bubbles disappear was kind of funny because it was like, no, I want to burst that thought, destroy that memory. No, I don't want that. Next one.
Right. And that's the nature of RPG makers. If you download the free software RPG Maker, pretty much all their assets and all their game mechanics just mimics the JRPG, so Japanese style RPG.
Yeah.
That's why you're right. It reminded me of Final Fantasy 2 when I saw it. I'm like, oh wait, this looks like Suikoden, Final Fantasy, whatever. That's out there.
Exactly, especially with the little cutaway scenes after a while. It's like, you stepped on the wrong tile. Now you've got your cinematic.
Yeah, the cutscenes. You're like, yay, they're back. But I added another additional piece, and then we're done with this set. Is that part of the problem with this whole premise? I mean, most players and critics play this and accept the game's premise. It's possible to alter someone's memory and think of, because of the sad circumstances of a dying man's wish, it seems to justify this activity. But the truth is that our sense of identity has long been studied, especially in philosophy of mind, that our sense of identity is tied to our memory. Okay? There's also another argument in that as we age, because of our body's constant cell renewal, there's an argument that we actually have different identities as we age. So we're not the same person as we were the previous year or 10 years ago. We're actually different people as we mature because our cells regenerate and renew. And we are basically composed of a whole bunch of cells. So we're actually changing people as we go. So I find this whole notion of traveling through someone's memory and altering parts of their memory as not a way to deconstruct or attack the integrity of their identity. Basically, we're altering identities now, but this game never quite get there, never quite address that problem. Okay, so I'm going to get off my podium here for the next little section. Here's another rhetoric. Go back a little bit on that. Yeah, the idea that physical objects, so mementos, serve as placeholders of memory. So they do address this issue. So Chris, if you don't mind, take this away.
Sure. About the following scene. I feel like I'm the narrator. In the following scene, Dr. Rosaline and Dr. Watts solve a memory puzzle, deciphering a platypus memento to access a moment in John Wyles' memory. The name of the platypus is Anya, and it serves as a memento of John's conversation with his dying wife, River. River has Asperger's syndrome, which makes communication difficult. John is able to understand River's dying wish for John to comfort Anya the platypus. Memento. You can prepare or do nothing. We choose to prepare because it's always better to prepare. Then you have data counter, current, ideal. You have the little puzzle you're playing with here. You're seeing the platypus there, seeing different pieces. Ideal shows the minimum number of moves. Then we see you have the puzzle. We're seeing what's behind the puzzle. Activate memento. Activate or pass. We choose to activate. And we've moved back in time. We're now moving slightly older. We see there's River on the bed with the platypus. And we see Johnny next to her. And then you see a whole bunch of rabbits all over the place. John, just enough. After we pay for your operation, we'll have just enough left for it. So don't you worry. River, white lie. That's what you call it, right? John, no, I'm sure we can just... River, stop it. I don't like it when you lie. I calculated our finances. I know how it's like. Why do you try to convince me against my will? John, we need the money for your medical bills, River. I understand that Anya means a lot to you, but this This is just too much. I mean, she isn't even. River, do you know what it makes me happy, Johnny? John, what? River, do you? River, well, I do. I just hope you can help me with it. John, River, when the papers for my treatment gets here, I will not sign them. What you do with our money is up to you. But if you would grant my wish, I want you to use it to finish building that house. And then, for every day that you live there, I want you to watch over her. Visit her. Speak to her. Comfort her. I don't want her to be alone anymore. John, and what about you? River, happy. I'll be happy. Johnny? John, yes. River, I made this. Tell me what it is. John, what? River, just tell me what it is. John, it's a rabbit. It's like all the others you've made. River, what else? John, it's made of paper. River, what else? John, its body is yellow and the rest is blue. River, good. What else? John, look, River. I wrote a song. It's for you. River, okay. John, well, would you like to hear it? River, yes. You didn't have to bring the piano in here for this. John, it's called For River. River, why so cliche? John, it's just a placeholder.
Awesome. that was a long section. So here's another concept that we can draw from that. There's something that the game does do that is accurate, okay? In that our memory, the way our memory works, it's actually contingent on the objects and the places that we visited. So what does that mean? Essentially, for philosophers, you can't really have memories if your memory is not about objects or situations or places you've been. So you can't really have memory without the external world. So the idea that external is external and internal is internal is kind of dissolved when you realize that your internal world is constituted by the physical world. So it does make sense in that the doctors were asking John to provide mementos, objects of memory, right? Objects that they remember to trigger his thought process, to trigger his memory, because actually memory does work this way. It's actually object contingent. That's why sometimes when you take someone to a specific vacation spot, or when you show them an object, all of a sudden it triggers their memory point. They go, oh yeah, I remember this, or I remember that. So objects actually constitute our memory. Even if objects do not speak to us, and objects have no willpower, they actually control our thought process. That's interesting, okay? So we're going to freeze frame right here, and I'm going to discuss the ending. So if you don't want to know the ending, skip this section for a little bit. It's going to take 10 minutes or something.
Like, spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
Spoiler. Okay.
Do not pass this part if you have not played this game.
Yeah. So here's the spoiler. Okay. So essentially, what is all this? I showed you there's a strange-looking platypus. There's bunnies all over the place, and his wife and him does not seem to get along very well. And River constantly is asking him to take care of Anya, and Anya's actually the platypus. So he's very confused by her request, right? He's wondering, why are you asking me to take care of an object? It's just an object. It's not even a real person. Right? Why do you want me to take care of it? Well, it turns out that in the past, John's brother, Joey Wyles, died. And it was a traumatic event for John. So John at some point contacted the company to remove that part of memory from his mind. Now, that in itself is breaking company policy, because we got the hint from the very beginning of the game that the company says we will not manipulate anyone's memory unless they're on deathbed. But somehow John was able to get away with this and say, please remove my memory of my brother dying because it's too painful for me. Okay. So the problem with him removing that is this. Part of that piece of memory that he removed, okay, also contains him meeting his wife, River, at a carnival. That's what it was. Yeah, a carnival. So they met at a carnival, and when he wiped the memory of his brother, he also wiped the memory of his wife, River. So throughout this, when we saw that previous scene where his wife seems to act very strangely and ask him, remember this thing and look at the bunnies or look at this platypus and take care of the platypus. Basically, that platypus is a representation of herself when she was young, when she met him at the carnival. So through this whole time, she was trying to draw his memory to remember her as a child. And John was never able to do that before she passed away. Okay, so that's the tragedy right there, is that he just couldn't remember. But the only thing he could remember, a sliver, a trace that was left from the previous memory, is that she and him, so River and John, promised that they are going to go to the moon as little children. Okay, whatever that meant. So as an adult, he does not know why he's requesting the scientists to implant a false memory of them going to the moon. But this is where it comes from, is this notion that he made a promise with his wife that they'll go to the moon. So perhaps in his mind that going to the moon will help him reconnect with his wife. Okay, so that was actually the sad ending there. And Chris, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about it is just, you know, it's one of those pieces that as you're playing through the game, things don't add up. And then you start going. So it's very well designed, very well written. And like I said, the music in here is really good as well, to setting the tone and setting the theme for the game as well. And you know, for me, I think actually what it was, I think it wasn't like his mother medicated him or something like that, and to make him forget about his brother.
Yeah.
I think that was what happened there, and then. It was funny that you know, they also tied in the whole thing about, you know, the constellation. The rabbit came from the constellation that they're looking at the sky at, and that the moon was the belly, which is why the rabbits where it was two-tone and two colors, was to represent the night sky. So it's kind of interesting to see the layering that went into that piece. So it's definitely a really nice game. It is a little sad and depressing. So it was funny because there's actually a YouTube video out there that is a compilation of all the streamers' reactions to this game. Yeah. And it's like a montage of people. Everyone is like bawling or crying or they're doing the stiff upper lip. Oh yeah, no, I got some dust in my eye. You know, they're doing all this stuff here. So it's definitely an emotional. You quickly get. I was surprised at how quickly you can get emotionally engaged in this game as you're going through it, because it touches along a lot of, you know, end of life pieces, looking at you know, people, the time when people first meet. The effects of forgetting things. I mean, forgetfulness, because, you know, since River is not necessarily, since she has Asperger's, she doesn't necessarily understand why, you know, Johnny doesn't remember. You know, so it almost seems like the latter half of River's life is obsessing over trying to get Johnny to remember their first moment at the carnival, as opposed to when they met later on at school. So I think that there's a lot of pieces that are interestingly pulled into this game.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I was surprised too. This was a tearjerker. Lots of people was like, "Who's cutting onions in here?"
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, this is a conversation in game design too. I'm just kind of, as a side comment too about game design, is that a lot of students in game design just automatically assume that if a game is made with high fidelity, which is this photorealistic, you know, it's this God of War kind of quality, really, it looks like as close as possible to reality, 1-to-1 ratio, that the game must be good. But there's more to designing a game. The narrative matters quite a bit, okay? Obviously, mechanics and dynamics, all those things matter, but a lot of people overvalue the high fidelity-ness of graphics as opposed to the other elements. And this game demonstrates that the writer essentially used writing to really convince his audience. And to this day, even though this game, and I know I usually cover games as much more recent, newer games, and this is why I struggle with this game a lot, but it's made in 2011, but notice that there's going to be a film about it in 2018, which means it's still resounding. People still want to play, even though the graphics really harkens back to like Final Fantasy 1. Right, or maybe 2, you know.
And that's one of the things that's interesting about the conversion of games to photorealism is that one of the nice things about low def is as a designer, as a graphic designer, it's very easy to hide flaws in low def environments, and so as a player, you don't notice seams, you don't notice bad splices, you don't notice poor transitions as much because everything's kind of pixelated, everything's kind of blocky, and so you just sort of accept that and you're able to oversee that. But I notice, like, when you start playing more photorealistic games, you start seeing the corners and the edging, and you start seeing where things aren't lining up, or where there's drift, or where they didn't really split a scene right, and you're just sort of like, that's just really horrible. And I find myself obsessing over that, and that negatively impacting my appreciation of the game, just because I'm like, you guys screwed up right here. Right.
Well, you're a player, you have more expectations though. Right? As a high fidelity game, you it seems that you have higher expectation because you play really good games. Yeah. The debate, though, going back, and that is also a very valid point on the problem of high fidelity game, but the low fidelity versus high fidelity debate in the game design community, it's also much more about the purity of the abstraction of games. The abstract level game, the more abstract the game is, the more it allows you to imagine, to fantasize. And that was actually one of the arguments for why interactive fiction is still performing really, really well on mobile app stores. I mean, some of the top selling games on mobile app stores are interactive fiction, even though it lacks graphics. That's because it gives the player space to imagine quite a bit due to its abstract nature.
And I think there's something else that's being added there. I just read an article, and I don't have it here, so I'm going to say the author is Victoria Carrington, but she was talking about games, virtual worlds, and any kind of online presence. And she's starting to do qualitative research on how, and she was looking at 16 to 24-year-olds, how the idea of presence, that being on a mobile device, you could feel as much presence as if somebody was there with you physically, and that cognitive and emotional presence is happening. So I think that this is going to get, even more popular. And the whole reason I was reading this article was to be thinking, working on something that's going to end up being interactive fiction, and we'd like to use the chat story base to make it look like a mobile conversation is happening. And we're really looking at it because we think that it's, and I know this is bad to say, but a cheap way to get engagement, because people already can immerse and engage just with their mobile devices and looking at text. And yeah, there's something beautiful about the story and the text being able to pull you in, even if the graphics, aren't optimal.
Right. And I'm gonna add to that, that was a great mention of presence in games. So it was a couple years ago when we did game psychology, when we did games psychology series. We did talk about presence, because presence is actually a psychology term. And the phenomenon of presence is this. What psychologists believe that presence is actually the official term that psychologists would call immersion. So they deny the word immersion because immersion is created from the game industry. And they're saying, okay, so it's the concept of immersing, dunking someone in water. So we understand that metaphor. So we understand why you use that word to describe this thing. But the accurate term that we've been using for decades, for many, many years now, is presence. So what exactly is presence? So the presence is the idea that you get the illusion that you're physically in another space when you're not. Okay, so you're traveling through time, and I mean traveling through space in a way, and it's an illusion that you're elsewhere. Okay, so when you're traveling through space, how does that activate? Okay, so through game studies and psychology, we know that the reason why we can travel to another place, that we have the illusion that we're present, our presence is somewhere else, is because our mind can construct a 3D model of that place. So how does that happen? So a narrative can easily give us a sense of presence if it's written well. If it gives us a sense of the size of the location, you know, the height, the width, the surrounding area. So using those ways of describing, you can get a sense of model, the sense of the location, and therefore you get the illusion of presence. In fact, presence also happens, for example, if I travel to Italy, Venice, you know, and I look around Venice, and I remember the location because it stood out to me. As I'm in Denver right now, I can imagine my vacation in Venice, okay? And if I remember that section, I get the illusion I'm sitting in a cafe at Venice because I remember the structural modeling of Venice as I remembered it. So it's memory triggered presencing. That also works, okay? So that's actually how it works. So they're denying this immersion as in something just happened and the game is well designed and just boom, it happens. Psychologists will say, well, there's an actual trigger for this, and we can actually demonstrate it every single time that that's actually how presence works. It's not just the game is really pretty or that the narrative is well written. It's actually the modeling of the location that triggers it. This is why Henry Jenkins talks about this narrative architecture a lot. Because the architectural design of the narrative actually triggers immersion or presence, as what psychologists would call it. Okay, so I'm going to move on from the ending. That's okay. Oh, I'm going to move on from there. We discussed that already.
Okay, we're like, and now we're still doing the spoiler. Go.
Sorry, we did the spoiler already. So I'm going to move on from here. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about the philosophy. I'm gonna be honest with you guys and say that it's been a challenge to discuss this philosophy without putting a bunch of slides in this one. But I'm going to try my best to kind of condense it as much as possible. Okay. I'm the one who took on the challenge to try to apply Jean-Paul Sartre's existentialism to examine this game. And his philosophy, most beginning philosophy students have studied a bit of his philosophy, but to understand his work in an in-depth sense is not easy. Okay, so I'm going to go next.
Yeah, I think we all had to read like Camus' Stranger during high school or something like that and go, oh, this person is without feeling and empathy.
Right, Camus, yeah, that's another famous existentialist, yes. I'm going to try, yeah, so the same line of existentialism, but I'm going to try to dissect Sartre's existentialism. And to be honest, I mean, really, guys, I'm going to show you pieces of his existentialism, but do not think that what I cover here is the extent of his scholarship, because his scholarship is much more broader than what I'm putting up here. Okay, so again, this is just to review what we said earlier. Okay, so Sartre is a 20th century philosopher who passed away very recently in 1980, and he's very well known for his existentialism. He's one of the fathers of existentialism. Okay, and again, he's concerned. His philosophical project, if you will, is the concern of what exactly does it mean to be a human being, specifically an authentic being. Okay, and in this world that is godless, because he's following the line of Nietzschean philosophy, which is the idea. Nietzsche famously said that God is dead, that this world no longer has God. Following that thread of thinking, this is what he is talking about, is what does it mean to be a being when there is no God? Okay, so his earlier philosophy, I'll just remind one more time, is that in his earlier life, earlier philosophy, he was obsessed with this idea of what exactly does it mean to live authentically. Okay, but his latter philosophy, he really wanted to talk about what is the moral responsibility of an individual living in a society of stratification, of the dichotomy between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. How does that dichotomy drive our moral philosophy? I am not going to cover that. We don't have time for that. So I'm going to cover the first part. So next. Okay, so he starts with his philosophical endeavor by talking about what it means to be a conscious being, okay? So consciousness, the word consciousness for Sartre is associated with the word about or aboutness. That means you're constantly thinking about something in the physical world. Okay, so our intentionality, so in philosophy of mind, okay, intentionality is not a thought by itself, but is your mind intending towards something, that you're thinking towards something. It's a direction of your mind, okay? So in aboutness is actually what renders a being conscious. So if you want to determine whether a being is conscious or not, does that being have an aboutness about him or her or it? Okay, so if it can think about something, therefore that's the condition for it being a conscious being. Okay, so as opposed to a non-conscious being or unconscious things that do not have aboutness. So human beings, given that we are basically conscious beings situated in the physical world, are always contemplating about things in the world, right? Because we live and are situated in this world. So therefore, as human beings being, and I know it sounds like a tongue twister, but that's how we explain it. A human being's being is always about the situatedness, her situatedness in this world around her. Oh, next. Okay, so one of the famous lines from Sartre is this idea that existence precedes essence. Now, why is this phrase so powerful? Okay, why is this statement so famous? Is because prior to Sartre, philosophical endeavors always start with this idea that essence precedes existence, okay? And what exactly is essence? Essence, you could think of it as purpose or the constitution or the ingredients or the DNA that makes you who you are, okay? Essence. And I'm using modern terms to kind of explain this concept because a lot of students get really confused on this notion. Okay, so he reverted this equation. He changed it to existence precedes essence, okay? Because, again, if essence precedes existence, it's the notion that nature or God gives purpose to all existence. So our purpose in life is given to us by God or nature, whatever that is, okay? So when he reverts, he's saying, wait a second, I just explained it to you that human beings are conscious. And by nature, because we are conscious, our mind is always about something. We cannot be anything but being about something, given that we are conscious beings, okay? And given that we are always about something, our existence is constituted by the aboutness of the things that we observe, that we experience. Therefore, our existence actually precedes essence. Our purpose is actually given to us, or I should rephrase that. Our purpose is obtained through our aboutness about the world. It's not given to us prior our existence. That's what he is talking about. So another famous line that Sartre talked about is this, he states, man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. So we are self-made. We are not made by others. We are made by ourselves. Okay, so I'm gonna go next. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So with that being said, when he changed the equation to existence precedes essence, two problematic concepts come up that naturally follows that concept, which is radical freedom and bad faith. So radical freedom there in the yellow bowl there refers to a freedom to choose to do anything that you desire, anything you want to do. Okay. And the only thing that one cannot do if you have radical freedom is choose to not do something, because you always are forced to choose. That is called radical freedom, okay? And this connects with Sartre's idea of a conscious being. Because you're conscious, you're always about, you're thinking about something, and therefore you are forced to choose anyway, no matter what you do, okay? However, radical freedom is not a happy term. It's not the layman idea of, oh, I'm free, I can do whatever I want. It's actually a really, really, really bad thing. Because if you are radically free, that means you can do whatever you want. That also means you have to bear all the consequences, all the burdens of the choices that you make in life. That you cannot say, oh, I can blame this authority or God or some institution telling me to do this, but that every choice I made was made by myself. Okay, that essence did not precede existence, and no one gave me this idea in my head to make this choice. I am making this choice myself. So if there's a bad consequence, I have to bear the burden of my consequence. So therefore, it's a condemnation of sorts. Okay, so you're suffering there. Next. Okay, so, and another way of saying the same thing here, that being a conscious being means that you are condemned to be free, or to be condemned to freely choose and bear the consequences of one's actions. So you're condemned, not by devil, not by God, not by some external evil force, but condemned by the condition, your natural human nature, which is that you have radical freedom for the very fact that you are conscious. So you have to choose no matter what you do, okay? Now, the other concept that's related to radical freedom is this idea of bad faith, okay? So bad faith is to deceive oneself that one's choices are not one's own. That means I made this choice and someone made me choose it, okay? Bad faith is the idea that you are denying that you made this choice because you made it. You made this choice because you determined so. So that is bad faith, okay? That you are blaming some external entity. So, for example, I'm not going to point out anybody in particular, just an example person. So you joined a cult. And lately, you know what scared me? Lately, I went to Wikipedia, and for off chance, I researched on alien cults. I just want to see how many are out there. And I scared myself because there are hundreds of alien cults. Cults are obsessed with aliens and outer space. But a lot of these cults, one of the similar themes about these cults is the belief that things that we do as human beings is because an alien willed us to do it. Like the alien tells me to burn my house, so I burned it down. There's a lot of that thing floating around. So for Sartre, it doesn't have to be religious based, right? But the idea that if you are saying that my choices are determined by other people, that I didn't make the choice by myself, that is a very simplistic way of explaining his notion of bad faith, okay? So his existentialist ethics essentially call on human beings to live an authentic life, okay? And what does it mean to live an authentic life? Is to exercise our freedom of choice. We kind of have to choose, okay? We have to exercise it too. We have to choose no matter what. And to accept our responsibility for our choices and actions. He also, and notice that this is our 5th installment of the ethics and game series. So we have several ethical theories that we addressed prior to this video today. But in the previous ones, where we addressed different kind of theories, Sartre would reject those theories. He would say, no one theory can really explain to you what choices you can actually make. Basically, you have to make that choice, and you have to take the burden of that choice. So now you have to carefully scrutinize the value of your choices, okay? So he denies all the other ethical theories. And also understand that Sartre's theory has also been heavily criticized for being highly individualistic. He only thinks of the individual. He does not think about society influences. But I'm presenting it to you as is, as the way Sartre conceives his philosophy. So next. Okay. So I'm going to apply quickly on how his philosophy is applicable to the moon. So next, okay. So if I'm using a Sartrean view perspective on examining what's happening in the game, I would argue, okay, and Sartre would argue, that John Wyles' choices that he made in his game is considered bad faith, that he's acting in bad faith, okay? Because instead of accepting the choice, a consequence of a choice is erasing memory, okay? So there is a choice that he's making. Even if you say, well, his mother did it to him or somebody else did it to him, technically in Sartre's equation, no, you made the choice. You made the choice to wipe your memory. You accepted this. So you made the choice to wipe your memory. Sartre does not deviate from this. He's pretty stern, okay, about this ethics. So in this sense, he was acting on bad faith for accepting the consequence of his decision. So the consequence of his decision is that he will also lose memory of other things, including River, right? Including his memory of River. So then he continued on his bad faith by requesting Sigmund Corp to insert false memory in his mind, okay? So that he could further deny the responsibility of his actions, the consequence of his actions. And Chris, did you want to add something there?
Oh, no, I just started thinking about that, and I'm like, it's interesting that based on, your statement here that Sartre's focus is that children, decisions that, if you use the mother example, that that minors are still responsible to accept the consequences of choices that may have been made by their guardian.
Yes. He does not distinguish age. Pretty much as a being, as long as you're conscious, as long as you can think about something. And also I do have to add, he doesn't address dogs or cats or bats. Okay. A lot of philosophers in the past do not believe that anything other than human beings have conscious thought. I mean, obviously more modern philosophers have disputed this. We have examined consciousness in cats, for example. But he is only talking about this idea that as long as you're conscious, you are aware. So conscious is being aware of your surrounding, aware that you're in a situation, that you're in this physical world. You are responsible for every action that you make. So if a child, for example, if a child decides to put his hand on the burner, and let's say the parents didn't watch, okay, and the child put his hand on the burner, well, the child's responsible for that decision. Now, in your equation, for example, if a child is forced by the mother or by the father to put their hand on the burner, Sartre's still going to say, well, the child, should have recognized that the parents have problems. And therefore, not recognizing your situation and recognizing your reality is how you live an inauthentic life. So understand that these philosophies, some of them are very strict at the way they conceive ethics. This is why we have to examine many, many different ethical theories, because it's not just one. We also are very humble to examine the weaknesses. In fact, that's what's interesting, is when there's a weakness in an ethical theory, okay, that we're examining. We're not just saying, okay, let's hold this. We're not upholding any of them as authoritarian, as this is the way things has to be, right? But yeah, it's interesting how Sartre would perceive a child's action. You're still wrong, kid. It's still your fault.
Yeah, it's still your fault, kid. Suck it up.
Yeah. And I have one more slide. Yeah, and that, this is the consequence. Again, the erasing part, whether he did it to himself or whether his mother did it to him, right, is still his problem. It's his problem. And the idea that you're implanting false memory is not accepting the reality of your situation. Because for Sartre, it's very important to recognize the situatedness of your physical world. He does make a distinction between imagination and memory, okay? He thinks memories are bad, okay? Because memories are full of facticities. And I am not able to address the whole gamut of Sartre's philosophy. But facticity is the idea, okay? It's the idea that there are limitations on your life that you're born into. So you can't choose who your parents are. You can't choose the place that you are conceived at, because your mom might be conceiving you at a hospital, at a hospital that you don't like. You don't have a choice over these things. So these are called facticities. But Sartre believes that as long as you're a conscious being, you can transcend your facticities, which are limitations, external limitations that try to put a limit on the potential of your life. And he will say, no, you can transcend beyond, you can think of ways, recognize your reality, and make decisions to transcend that. So he believes that you can transcend these facticities, okay? So facticity is also very important in size, based on reality, right? It's based on things that actually happen to you. So if he conceived this, if he read or viewed this game, if Sartre's still alive and he's playing this game, he would say, what is going on here? Why is this man allowed to implant false memory to confuse himself, to deny himself, to reject the reality that he lives in, to deny the physical world that he lives in by conceiving a whole fake memory that he can live in this wonderful fantasy without taking on the responsibility of his life. Even if he has sickness, even if he's depressed, these are the reality of his life. These are the consequences of his actions, of his choices that he made. He has to take on that. That is what being an authentic person is, not to hide or live in a fantasy world of your own making. So he would say this is really bad faith. He is not taking on responsibility for his life. So Sartre would judge this game very, very harshly. And that's where I'm going to end. I'm not saying I have no empathy for this game. I felt very, very sad for this game, because if anyone have ever experienced losing family members or losing friends, you know, and experience any kind of death, even losing pets, it's a very painful process. And part of our wish is to say, well, I want to erase bad memories and I just want to live without any pain. But our identity, here's the funny part, here's the irony. Our identity as individuals is based on what we have experienced throughout life. So if you eliminate part of those memories, you're no longer the same person. So myself, Sherry, myself, will no longer be the same Sherry as I am now. If I decided to willy-nilly cut parts of my life out or insert fantasies that I want to live in because I am no longer me. Now, virtual reality kind of segue to virtual reality. At least there is a break. Virtual reality, I am temporarily in that reality, temporarily, okay? Then I can jump out of that and return to this physical reality. So I'm not completely connected to it. There's a disconnect for me to distance myself away from that reality that was generated. But if I am constantly living in virtual reality, I'm never out of virtual reality, kind of like some people, the fantasy of Ready Player One, which is people living constantly in there. This would be an inauthentic life because you're really not addressing the reality of your situation. So we could have applied this to explain what's happening in Ready Player One as well. It's not exactly, you know, an accident or surprise how the ending was about, hey, face your reality, because your reality is kind of important. Your physical body, your mind is constituted by the physical reality. It's not constituted by virtual reality, which is a layer that you use to hover or cover your reality. So anyway, that's it for me today.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, what's really intrigues me about this game, as well as, you know, your application of Sartre's philosophy, is that it makes me think of Alzheimer's and dementia patients, where they are, you know, to some extent, omitting a memory as they progress through the illness. And you see some of these patients and some of these individuals have these flights of fancy where they do, you know, they basically have the equivalent of Sigmund coming in, and because they can't remember what actually happened, they make up their own stories with what's left behind. And so it's kind of interesting to see this, or it would be more interesting to see this extended, to see how it handles something biologic like Alzheimer's or dementia, and how things apply as possibly a way to sort of explain what's going on there whenever your memory is being deleted or being omitted, but not necessarily by one's own action.
Right. And that, in response to that, and that was a great example, Chris, of the mental disorders. The philosophy, Sartre's philosophy, doesn't address that. In fact, his philosophy has been, you know, this is why existentialism is out of style now, because it gives too much weight to the ability, the power of the individual to make decision, even though there's external forces that might prevent us from making those decisions. But this is a thread of thinking that some people still adopt to, that the belief, perhaps naively, believing that you can make any choice you want. But Sartre, let me clarify something though. Sartre would not say, okay, I don't think he would say that people with amnesia are living inauthentic life. They cannot but, right? Because of their biological condition, put them there. It's not like they willfully decide to let me wipe my memory out. It's this consciousness, to be conscious and to make that decision, okay, that determines whether or not you're living authentic life, okay, exercising radical freedom, or living bad faith. I don't think he would say that. I don't think he would say, oh yeah, in this case, they didn't even have the ability to willfully say, yeah, I want to erase my memory. I don't think he would say that. But another thing as a saving grace to make sure that people who want to critique Sartre, really, before you can critique a philosopher, you also need to actually understand the philosopher. And the thing is that he's not really saying that everyone can do whatever the heck they want. He is just saying a very basic point, okay? That, look, there's no God anymore. You can't blame nature for your ability. And he's not trying to say, oh, biology. He doesn't want to even cover that. He is saying, you are going to suffer the consequence of your action. It could be good consequence, it could be bad consequence, but recognize that you are the one who make those decisions, and you must make a decision. If it's a hostage situation and it's, moral dilemma, you still have to make this decision. You cannot say, I don't make decision, because if you don't make a decision, that's also bad faith, because you're not exercising your freedom to choose. So he is very, very specific on this. And I think there's a value in that in itself, to recognize your responsibility as an individual. That's the main point he's trying to drive with his earlier philosophy, not the latter part of his philosophy.
Cool.
Okay, I think we have one more slide, don't we?
No,
yes.
Just me. It's just me, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed it. I try really hard to explain. Oh, sorry. I try really hard to explain a really hard philosophy.
Everybody have a great weekend. Play this game sometime when it's raining on your on the inside. Okay. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.